Hey everybody, let me show you an example of how to begin your concept map. So the first step is to choose any two vocabulary words and start a separate mind map, one for each of them. So I chose profiling and gentrification for no other reason than they're just the first words on our list, and we'd be familiar with them by today. So your next step is to just build out your mind map. So what I mean by that is add as much information as you know about each term. So to begin, and this might get a little sloppy, this is my first draft, right? I'm going to actually make a final draft after this. My job right now is to build out as much information as I know about each term until I can identify what their relationship is. Like, what do they have in common? How do they connect? Is one the cause and one the effect, etc.? So let's just see first if we can build out what we already know. So I'm obviously going to just start with the definition. Okay, so that's the definition just from the 2.1 document, right? So what else do I know? Well, that definition is kind of like a legal version of this is called stop and frisk. That's a word that you guys will work on today. So that's kind of another term, another vocabulary term. I also know that profiling is done by police. I think it might be important to know that it's also called racial profiling or police profiling. I think it's also important that we recognize profiling results in high percentage of the prison population is this is kind of like the prison pipeline that we hear about. Okay, so I'm going to stop there and move on to gentrification. What do I know about gentrification? Well, let's first just begin again with the definition. The next couple notes I'm going to add, I learned from the TED Talk video that you watched from assignment 2.1. So the speaker from that New York TED Talk said a couple things that I think are important to help me understand this word. One, it's an investment in neighborhoods that have historically been disinvested in. So that results in displacement. She talked a lot in that video about sort of overt displacement and sort of more insidious levels of displacement. But also, she said it results in, say this, but I picked up that this sort of means a further widening of the wealth gap. It's a spatial expression of economic inequity. Okay, so you get the idea, right? I could probably add a few more details, but this is where I'm at. My job now is to understand, what do these have in common? What is the relationship between profiling and gentrification? Excuse me. And one thing that kind of stands out to me is the idea of displacement, because she said that displacement black and she said black and brown people are disproportionately displaced or removed from their homes, right? And that makes me think, well, that's what happens here too. If the majority of the people being profiled are people of color, and then our prisons are mostly made up of people of color, that's a different form of displacement. So it's like they're being displaced from their home. Okay, now I have a connection. So I have this idea that black and brown people are being disproportionately displaced. So I'm going to play around with that. I'm going to figure out maybe how I can refine that thinking and come up with a visual, a final draft concept map that really highlights this idea that people are being displaced, either from their homes because they can't afford to live there anymore, or from their homes because they're being sent to prison. So that's an interesting little connection here. This is my first draft. My job now is to refine my thinking and make it a little clearer in a final draft.